Unloved by my wife for so long, I tear her clothes in fury, only to be stunned by the strange marks on her body. My wife and I have been married for only 6 months. Our love and affection for each other are still strong and passionate. After the wedding, I asked my wife to quit her job and stay at home because her workplace was too far away. Commuting daily was exhausting, and I didn't like the idea of her staying in a boarding house and only coming home on weekends. She also didn't want to be away from her husband like that, which aligned with my perspective. So, I told my wife to quit her job, take care of the family, and planned for pregnancy. She obediently listened to me and expressed her desire to dedicate more time to our future child, not trusting anyone else to look after them. Her compliance made me very happy, and it aligned perfectly with my beliefs. My father passed away a long time ago, and currently, my wife and I live with my mother. My mother loves and supports my wife as well. About a month ago, I had to go on a business trip that would last around 3 months. It was difficult for me to bear being away from my wife for such a long time, but work obligations left me with no choice. Before leaving, I gave my wife some money, advising her to go out with friends for coffee, go shopping, or visit her relatives to alleviate her boredom at home. Without her husband around and being unemployed, she might feel lonely. That money was specifically for my wife, while the daily expenses were provided to my mother. It was more convenient for my mother to handle the grocery shopping since she was familiar with the local market, which was easier than for my wife. During my business trip, I made video calls to my wife every day to talk, but I still missed her terribly. Unable to bear it any longer, 2 weeks ago, I asked her to buy a plane ticket to come and spend a few days with me. Since I was too busy to return, and she wasn't working, she had more free time. My mother was still in good health and could stay at home alone. My wife hesitated but eventually agreed after I persuaded her. When I picked up my wife from the airport and brought her to our accommodation, I couldn't wait any longer and immediately carried her to the bed. However, she kept refusing, claiming she was tired from the journey. Hearing her words, I felt sorry for her and suggested she take a shower and rest. By the evening, after dinner, I hurriedly pulled my wife into the bedroom. It was then that she insisted on turning off the lights, while we used to have the habit of keeping them on during intimate moments. Moreover, after such a long time apart, I wanted to see her clearly. Her unusual behavior raised suspicions within me. It was almost as if I had to force her to remove her nightgown, and then I had to reluctantly examine her body. There were numerous fresh and old bruises all over her, and her fair skin made them even more horrifying. It turned out that this explained her strange behavior. Clearly, something had happened at home that I was completely unaware of. I raised my voice and asked my wife about the cause and why she had hidden it from me. At first, she claimed she had fallen, but I didn't believe it. The marks looked more like bite marks. However, they didn't resemble any signs of intimacy. Then, when I heard my wife tearfully confess everything, I was horrified and couldn't believe it. Even in my wildest dreams, I couldn't have imagined that the person responsible for my wife's injuries would be my own mother. Listening to my wife sobbing while recounting the words and actions of my mother towards her, I finally understood that my mother was consumed by jealousy. Because I loved and cherished my wife, because I sympathized with her struggles and asked her to quit her job and stay at home. Because wherever I went, I always bought gifts for my wife, and whenever she felt a little down, I thought of ways to comfort her, taking her out to eat or have fun. Even on my business trip, I gave my wife a considerable amount of money to spend, so she wouldn't feel sad. As for the daily necessities, I entrusted my mother because I was worried that my wife, as a new daughter-in-law in an unfamiliar environment, would have difficulty adjusting to our living conditions. My family was never wealthy before. My father was an emotionally distant man, neglecting his wife and children. My mother had an unhappy marriage. I understood that and tried to make up for it when I started earning money. But I also had to love and cherish my wife, right? I only thought that she was a new daughter-in-law in a foreign land, without anyone familiar by her side, so I wanted to be more accommodating and treat her well. And my wife, afraid of how I would react, kept everything hidden from me. Seeing her like that only made me feel even more sorry for her. As for my mother, I felt a mix of anger and sympathy. Now, I find myself in a difficult position, unsure of how to handle this situation without anyone suffering.